Hey everyone, RogueGold here, welcome back to the Division 2, and today we are going to be covering some of the most important and need-to-know settings and hidden features that exist within the game. Now, I just want to be clear at the top, this is not a video where we are going to be covering every single setting in the game and explaining it and deep diving on it. We would be here for hours. However, I frequently get questions and comments such as, man, I wish we had Apparel Loadouts in the game to go with our gear loadouts. Or, how do you move your damage numbers off to the side like that? Why does it look like you're running faster than me in gameplay? We are going to be answering all of those and many more within this video. There are many settings and tweaks to be made in the Division 2 that are off the beaten path, hidden away in different menus, and many of them can drastically improve your gameplay, quality of life as you play, and more. I originally made one of these videos over 3 years ago in 2022. I know it helped a lot of you out back then. We will be covering some of the same items that we went over in that video because they're just as relevant as they were back then, but the main reason why I wanted to do an updated version of this, there's been new stuff added, things have changed, and so this video is now up to date for the beginning of 2025 in Year 6 Season 3 of the game. Hopefully by the time we are done you have learned something new or you're able to actively enjoy your gameplay more than you did before. If that does end up being the case and you want to check out more of my Division stuff moving forward, then I hope you will consider clicking that subscribe button if you've not already. And without further ado, my friends, let's go. Alright, so we are going to begin by going over a few different categories within your main settings menu within the game. To access that from this screen right here, you just tab to the very bottom right, click settings, and we open this. Now again, we're not going to cover every single setting within every single category because that would take us a very long time. And frankly, many of them are pretty self-explanatory for whether you might want them enabled or disabled. However, one by one, we're going to go through a few of these categories, and I'm going to highlight some of what I think are the more important and harder to understand just off the bat settings that you're probably going to want to know about. So let's begin right here in gameplay. We're actually going to look at the very first one here, distance and temperature units. This may seem like a pretty trivial thing, but it can be kind of important, especially within group play. So your options here are metric or imperial. If you don't know what those are, essentially those are just the two different measurements of distance and temperature that we have in real life. You can either do metric, which is what I have enabled. So when I set a waypoint, you'll see that it says, doesn't say it there, but when I go on the map, it is 0.7 kilometers away, whereas we'll leave that exact same waypoint. I will go back and change this to now imperial. If we look at that same waypoint, it is now 2,568 feet. So all this comes down to is if you want your distance measured in feet and miles versus kilometers, and if you want your temperature gauged in Fahrenheit versus Celsius. Again, it's very preferential, and this might not matter to all of you, but specifically in group content, if you're trying to make callouts saying this thing is 300 feet away or, 0.3 kilometers away, different groups might have different ways of interpreting that, so I wanted to let you know about that one. Next up in the gameplay tab, we're going to scroll way down here until we find show skills on group frame. I think this is a very vital setting. For the vast majority of you, you're going to want this turned on. What it does is that when you have no selected, when you have teammates in your group, and I'll show imagery of this on screen so you can actually see what I'm talking about, it won't show what skills they have equipped, whereas if you switch show skills on group frame to yes, it will then show you what skills your teammates are running. Again, unless you're doing some very specific thing where you don't want to see that, that is pretty vital information that you're going to want to know in the vast majority of group content. So I highly recommend that you enable this show skills on group frame setting. Next up, we're going to look at the one right below that, and that is show numeric skill cooldown time. This one, while I cannot imagine myself playing without this setting, of course it's going to be up to your own preferences. What it does, this one is very easy to demonstrate. If I throw out a skill and I put it on its cooldown, instead of it just being a bar refilling and I have to guess how long is left, it shows you a number. So I have 31 seconds, 30, 29, and that'll keep counting down until it's ready to use again. So yeah, again, that one is up to you, but I would have a very hard time playing if I didn't know how many seconds exactly my skills had left before I could use them once again. Alright, and then there's one final setting that I wish to point out to you in this tab, and that is at the very bottom, you will find additional field of vision. If you don't know what FOV does, that's what this stands for. We'll set that to 0. This is what your game is by default. This is how it looks when you play the game, right? Some of you might be very familiar with this this overall look and feel of the game, but compare this, what you're seeing right now. I'm going to fast forward and turn on FOV and just see the difference. Alright, get ready. Now when I come out of here, wow, you can see so much more stuff. Additionally, I've gotten questions about this over time. This does give you the appearance that you're running faster just because you can see more of the environment passing by. I just want to ensure you are not actually running faster. The movement speed is the same whether or not you have this setting enabled, but I think this just allows you to see way more of the game. It is a stylistic choice. If you don't like this, you can of course turn it down. You also don't have to max it out like I did. I went all the way for 25 field of vision. You could have that at 12 or 13 right in the middle. You can also tune how much that impacts your ADS amount. Do you want to see that same kind of field of view when you're aiming down your gun? Totally up to you, but this is a very important setting to be aware of. Alright, next up, we are just going to jump down one tab here to UI. Two pretty important things to point out here in my opinion. Firstly, you have the ability to fully customize your HUD. I get a lot of comments from people saying, why can't I disable the HUD in this game? The only thing this setting will not allow you to change is the middle little box that you get showing your ammo count and your armor. Other than that, pretty much every single element of the UI can be changed within this little menu here. You can change how big certain elements are. See if I move up to and put my conflict score right in the middle of the screen there if I wanted, right? And go to my radar. A lot of people like to move or change this. You can put this over here with all your objectives. And for me, I have a layout saved with nothing in case I want that kind of more immersive experience. The point is, it's totally up to you. You have 3 different layouts that you can save. I'm going to reset this one that I messed with. But yeah, that is there if you need it. And then the other very important one to point out here is scrolling combat text. Now I'm going to set this to random sphere, as this is what it will be when you first boot up the Division 2. What scrolling combat text refers to is actually your damage numbers. So if we go into the shooting range here, and I shoot a target, you will see that all of my numbers are right there in the middle with that font size. That is what the game will be by default again when you first boot it up, or if you never go and change that setting. The way that I prefer to do it, and the one that I get asked about all of the time, is I like to switch scrolling combat text to floating, because what it does is it removes all of those numbers right from the middle of your screen and it puts them neatly stacked up over on the right side. I think this lets you see your crosshair and where your bullets are actually landing a lot better. I just think this is a much more cleaner way to display damage numbers. Once again, as with most of these, it is going to be preferential which one you want, but among everything we're looking at in this video, this is definitely one of the more important ones to be aware of. Alright, next up we are moving on down to controls. Now again, a lot of these things are very important settings. I highly recommend, if you haven't, going through and fine-tuning your sensitivities, your dead zones. All of that stuff are very important settings, but it is going to be very tuned for your own gameplay and preference. The one setting within this that I think is vital to point out in my opinion is this right here, move around corner speed. Reason being, I think it is very understated just how much of a difference this can make, especially in some of that higher risk, high reward content like PvP especially. So I'm going to toggle this back to slow because this is what the game will have it as when you first boot it up. And you'll see if I go to move around the corner just by pressing my joystick, you have to wait for that arrow to fill all the way up and then you go around the corner, right? If I then toggle this back to fast, which is what I play on personally, you see it's much more snappy. You can basically just send the joystick over a little bit and you will begin that animation. Again, maybe some of you will prefer slow because you don't want to accidentally hit that input and be sent around a cover corner that you don't want to be, but I much prefer how snappy it feels in my gameplay, so be aware of that. Alright, then once again, jumping down, we are going to go all the way to accessibility this time. Once again, a lot of useful things in here that you might want to take a look at if you haven't been to this menu before. The one I want to highlight specifically actually comes from the Colorblind Settings. Now, of course, if you are colorblind, you're going to want to maybe tweak these to improve your overall experience in the Division 2. However, even if you are not colorblind, these settings actually come with a very interesting tweak. So, compared to having it on none, if you set it to any of the 3 settings here, we'll go with this one that I'm not going to try and say the name of because I'll probably butcher it. But look at this, all of a sudden, compared to your normal gameplay, every skill and thing that you can do in the game with a radius now has this distinct, you can see those white lines around it. This is to help people who are colorblind, of course, understand the radius of whatever they're using. But it's actually a pretty useful setting even if you don't have those impairments because, yeah, it's just a much more defined way to see the radiuses of your skills. Like I said, this also works with grenades. If I pull this out, you'll see that has the very handy thing on it as well. So again, for PvP, for certain content, this can be very useful. I see a lot of players running this who are not colorblind themselves. So yeah, it's good to know that this is a potential option for you. Alright, next up, I want to take a look at some things within our inventory. Would you believe me if I told you that there is an entire hidden settings menu within your inventory in the game? Well, there is, and there is a very specific way that you need to access it. You actually can't get to it from this overall screen. What you need to do is click on any item. Let's go to my gloves, and you will see down at the button prompts that I have at the bottom, I can click in my left stick, and of course that'll have a different keybind on PC, to open up the options menu, and look what pops up here. This gives you a ton of options. Now the main things that I want to take a look at are what are on the left, right, and bottom. Let's start on the left side here with inventory view. This is a very great one to set early on in your Division 2 experience, depending on how you want to sort through your inventory. The options you have are list. This is what the game has it set to by default, and this is the view that you're probably familiar with. However, you can also switch this to grid, and what that does is actually lets you see more things on screen at one time. It reduces quite how much you can see in the overall like main view in that center column, but like I said, you're able to see many more items within this one view, so that is super good to be aware of in case you prefer this. Next up, we'll go back to that options menu. Let's take a look at what is down to the bottom here. There are a few very important settings within this. The first two are numbers based, whether or not you want to see the PvP stats for an item. You can do that right there. You can also turn on whether or not you see base damage when you view a weapon. But the two at the bottom are what I want to focus on because these actually have to do with cosmetic things. It's kind of funny that they're not in the apparel menu, but they actually come in right here. The first one is show signature weapon. I have this set to off, but if I turn it to back on, and we go all the way out, suddenly my firewall flamethrower that I have equipped is on my backpack. But again, if I go right back in and I disable that option like I had it on, you no longer see that. So if you don't want to see your specialization weapon on your backpack, many players feel that they're a bit too bulky and clunky, you can turn that off right within there and you will no longer see it. Additionally, you then have always show mask. Now what this does is it gives you an option to display your gear mask even when you're not within the dark zone. If you've played The Division for any length of time, you'll know that in lore, these masks exist for us to put on when we enter contaminated areas, right? However, when you're out in the majority of game's content, it will be off as you don't need that extra layer of protection. But if you're like, hey, I've got a cool mask and I want to see it while I'm playing, you can toggle this setting and look at that. Your agent will put their mask right on, and it will then stay on regardless of what content you're going and playing. Do be aware that masks that you put on within the apparel menu will override this, so in case, and some of them have weird clipping things like you're seeing right here, but if you're toggling that setting and you're not seeing your mask appear, be sure that you have nothing like this equipped within your apparel menu, because then that setting does nothing, right? It's the apparel ones will override if you have those equipped, so just keep that in mind. All right, and then finally, over on the right side, we have sort by. This is what I think is a very vital setting in terms of inventory management and how players overall function with the amount of gear that you get in this game. All this does is that it dictates how gear is laid out within your inventory. You have stuff that you can choose like level, quality, brand, recent, loadout, sell value. And if you look at the gear behind here, I'll click loadout for example, and that changed compared to the default. You can see, I'll back into this so you can really see, but the item switching behind there. Now I have stuff saved by loadout, so everything that I have in a loadout is saved here at the top. Or if I go back to the one that I had it on, or you switch it to default, then it puts my exotics at the top. The one I use myself is actually sorted by new here, and let me go and give you a quick demonstration of why that is. So by having this on new, whenever I pick up any new gear within the game, which of course if you played the Division 2, you know is happening all of the time, when I pick up this CMG Banshee, upon going into my inventory, and I can see that my weapons category has an exclamation mark because I picked that up, the nice thing is I don't have to search for it. It puts any new items that you've picked up, you can see right here at the very top for you to deal with. I find this to be incredibly useful, so I can choose if I want to keep it, or if I don't, then I just click junk on it and I can do with it as I please. But the point is, you can set that however you like. I think new is the most worthwhile for me personally, but it's very, very good to be aware of. All right, now another one that I definitely wanted to point out to you all. A good amount of you might already be aware of this, but if not, this is just super good to at least have it in the back of your mind, and that is the all gear tab. If we go over all the way to the right side here, you'll see near the middle we have this chess piece symbol. This is what is considered your all gear tab. What it does is, excluding weapons, it lays out everything that is in your inventory in this one tab. Now you may wonder, why is this useful compared to just going into the individual categories that I already do? Well, main reason being because you can actually sort it however you like. If you see down at the bottom, I can hold Y to filter options, and you can select however you want this specific category to lay out your items. If you just want to see stuff that has damage to targets out of cover out of it, you can click that. Oh, it's just those two pieces. If I want that and damage to armor, oh, you can do that. So again, some of you might not have a huge use for this. I personally don't use this tab all that often, but depending on what you're doing, how you like to sort through stuff, you could even do this to go through the new gear you've gotten, see it all in one pane as opposed to having to go through each individual category. Again, it's all about options. That's another one to know about. Next up, let's have a conversation about mods, shall we? Firstly, talking about gear mods. Everybody knows about these things. They're the ones that you can slot into your chest piece, mask, and backpack, and they can grant you very relevant bonuses from each of the different categories of stats within the game. But if you are somebody who scrolls down this entire list every time that you're trying to find the one mod that you want to slot into your build, you actually don't have to do that. If you look down at the bottom here, you have two different options. Firstly, you can open up the filter options, just like we did in the all gear tab, to sort by whichever specific stat that you want. Or additionally, and you can actually do this on top of that, you can also set the gear type. So you can choose whether you want to see offensive, defensive, or utility mods. Let's go for utility specifically. That'll then only show yellow-based mods, right? The skill-based stuff, and aside from the 1 crit chance, because that's what I have equipped, it then grays everything else out and only shows you stuff that has relevant skill bonuses. So again, in terms of saving you that time while you're trying to look through and slot in what you want, this one is a really good one. Moving away from just gear mods, however, let's take a look at one very useful tool to be aware of for skill mods specifically. If we click on our mod menu down here towards the bottom right, you'll see that I have an option at the bottom for auto deconstruct skill mods. I believe this is turned off by default. I'm not 100% sure on that though, so you might want to go and check what it is for you. But what this does, it is a system and feature that they added a few updates back. What it will do if you have this enabled is that if you try to loot or pick up a mod, or you're just awarded one that is a lower value than one that you already own in your inventory. So for example, if we go to my sticky bomb attachments right here, I have a 7% duration mod within the, what slot is it? The launcher slot. If I were to pick up another sticky bomb mod within the launcher slot that has 5% duration, the game would then automatically deconstruct it and give me the relevant resources and rewards from that I would have gotten from manually deconstructing. So all it really does is save you that extra bit of time from having to go in and manually deconstruct stuff, because you can use, multiple of these mods in the same slot, right? That's just not how the game works. So that can be a really good time-saving option if you want that kind of a thing. Some players prefer to have it off because they like to choose what they deconstruct or versus what they sell. Having this off also gives you the ability to pick up those mods and then share them with potential group members or newer players. So again, the choice is totally yours, but very good to be aware that that option exists. Let's now move on and talk about some apparel stuff, shall we? If we go down here into your apparel menu, this is of course where you can choose what outfit and clothing your character is wearing. One of the funniest comments that I get here on the channel is people saying, man, I wish that I just had apparel loadouts that I could save different outfits together so I didn't have to go and manually do it all the time. Well, you actually can. Just like many things in this game, it is easy to overlook, but you can see down at the bottom that if I click the exact same button that would open up my gear loadouts were I in my regular inventory, that actually opens up your selection of apparel loadouts. That's right, you can have the exact same feature for apparel within the game. What some people like to then do is name these the exact same things as their gear loadouts so that they know what outfit goes with what thing. They can just equip the two and be on their way. I name mine a bit separately and I do it my own way, but again, the option is yours, and this exists if you want to go in and save different outfits so that you don't have to go and try and scroll through all of these various things all the time. So very good to be aware that apparel loadouts exist in case you want that feature. Staying on the theme of apparel and clothing within the game, let us talk about Transmogrification. If you don't know what that word means, it is kind of a mouthful. It harkens back to games like World of Warcraft, that's at least where I learned it from. What it basically stands for is making a piece of gear that you have look like something that it's not, right? So if we go into any gear item here that you have equipped to your loadout, you can hit mod, and not only are you going to be able to equip your gear mods here for those specific pieces that they're allowed on, but additionally you have two circular based slots down here. One of these we'll get back to, but the other is the appearance slot, and if you go through, you can make your gear item look like any other gear item that you own within the game. So it's going to sort it first here by your gear sets, then you can move down to the brand sets, and you can keep going all the way down the list. Eventually it'll get to purples and greens and grays. Any item that you come across in the game will automatically get added to this menu right here, and you can make any item that you're wearing look like anything else. And again, this option exists for every single slot. We can go down to our gloves here, mod those, and we have the exact same appearance slot option. You can do it here, but that's not where it ends. Additionally, we can then go over to our apparel menu, and down here towards the bottom we have this row right here, and what these are cosmetic based skins for gear items. So these are not going to be tied to any specific gear sets or brand sets within the game. These are just skins for those items that if you want to place on top of stuff, you can. So for example, if we pick out maybe the sledge backpack here, this is one that people like a lot. What selecting something within this menu is going to do is override any other options that you have selected. So once you equip that, you actually, even though it looks like it in this screen, we'll switch to this right now, it's still going to override with the sledge backpack, as you can see right there. So the apparel selections that you make there, this will override anything else. That means, and what many players like to do, is that this can actually override the appearance of exotic items if you don't like how a particular backpack looks or whatever it may be. As long as you have something slotted into the apparel tab skin there, the skin slot, that'll override the look of whatever else you may have equipped. But again, if you would rather have a gear appearance selected, you can go and unequip this and then go back to your gear stuff. We'll put on a non-exotic backpack, and you can then go through and choose any of these like we were just looking at. The other very important thing to be aware of here is that all of this stuff can be dyed. In other words, change the color of it. So if we equip this one, then the other slot that you have access to is the dye slot. I have full black equipped right now, but you can see that of all the dyes you own, they will all be within this menu. You can change the colors of this. Different ones will have different amounts of how much of the item they change, the regular ones versus the full ones. Once again, it is entirely up to you how you make your character look within the Division 2, so I will leave this to you, but this option exists here. And the same exact thing goes for those apparel ones that we just looked at. We can put, actually I don't think that one changes because it's a special case, but this one is a good example. The Smile backpack, you can then see at the bottom I have a dye button. If I click that, it opens up that exact same menu and you can change the look of it right there. So just one of the many options that the Division 2 gives you to customize how your character looks. Alright, now as we wrap towards the end here, I wanted to look at a few things within the gameplay of the Division 2 itself that you can tweak and change to greatly improve your experience, in my opinion. The first here is within the shooting range, and this is one of those classic examples where people see this and they're like, what? I had no idea that that was here the entire time. So if you're in the shooting range here trying to test out different builds, see damage numbers, whatever you may be doing, you probably know how this works in general. You can of course change the veterancy of the hostile right here. If you don't want them to be a red bar, you can make them a purple bar, an elite, a boss, whatever you want. But if you look just a little bit higher, what do these numbers stand for? You can set the range that your target is going to be at. If I shoot that 5, it sets it right there. If I shoot the 10, that's going to put it further away. And same thing with the 20, it'll put it all the way back there. I guarantee somebody watching this video is going to learn about this for the first time, and that's great. So yeah, if you want to dictate a specific range for your target within the shooting range, that is how you do it instead of having to rely on it randomly doing it like that. I think if we reset, it might put it there. No, so you might have to leave and come back if you want the green selection to go away. But yeah, you can manually toggle your ranges right there. Same for this one. You can set it to 25, 35, 45, and 50. So really great to be aware of this for specific testing purposes. All right. And then finally, we get to something that is going to save you a good amount of time in the game. No pun intended. The reason I'm standing at this spot here, if you might be familiar with it, if you ever try and do the hunter puzzles in the Division 2, this is one of the spots where you can spawn hunters in the open world and fight them. Well, a lot of those puzzles and sometimes other stuff within the game requires you to know what time it is within the in-game clock. And specifically why I wanted to do this in this video, because this has changed since the last time I made one of these videos. You used to have to dive way into your photo mode settings to figure out what time of day it was. Well, in case you've overlooked this, you can just open up this little, main screen right here, and look at that right at the top next to where it says East Mall. I have my coordinates. To the left of that, it shows you what time it is. So it is 7:55 in the morning right now. But again, oftentimes these hunter puzzles will be like flip a switch at after 2100 at night, and you're like, well, how do I know when that is? You just have to open this menu and you can see it right there. So once again, just another way to smoothen out your experience by just a little bit. And there you have it, folks. That is the breakdown of what I deem to be some of the best settings and hidden features that you need to know within the Division 2. I very much hope you all enjoyed and most importantly learned something new, right? If after you've gone through and watched all of that, you continue to have any questions about certain things within the game or things we covered in this video, certainly let me know, and as always I will do my best to respond. Also importantly, if you think I missed anything in this breakdown, any settings, features, other tweaks that people can make to their game, I would love it if you would leave those down in the comments too. Let's make this as collaborative and supportive of an environment as we can. But that is just about going to do it for me today, folks. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. RogueGold. Ow.